On Saturday, the Pope made public the appointment of the new prefect of the dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, Monsignor Victor Manuel Fernandez, Archbishop of the Argentine city of La Plata, and one of the people close to the Pope. None of the appointments made by the Pontific in these years of governing the Church has caused such an uproar and raised so many criticism as this one. Those objections are centered on 2 points. On the one hand, the person chosen, and on the other hand, the letter with which the Pope made the appointment public, and where he explains to the new prefect what he expects from this position and how the doctrine of the faith has to act from now on. For many, it is a refoundation of this very important Vatican congregation. The objections regarding the person of Monsignor Victor Manuel Fernandez have focused on 3 points. On the one hand, his attitude and behavior in cases of sexual abuse, specifically a case de cause in the Diocese of La Plata while he was Archbishop. A North American organization, Bishop Accountably, has accused him of not having attended the victims correctly and not having paid attention to them. The abuser priest committed suicide shortly before being arrested by the police. The diocese has issued a statement saying that Monsignor Fernandez did attend and give credit to the victims, but that if he did not act by opening a canonical trail against the priest, it was because he didn't have time, such the priest committed suicide. Well, that is a question that remains there, that remains open, and I don't know if in the future it will have or not any impact. The other matter refers to the one of the books published by the Archbishop many years ago when he was a young priest. The book is entitled The Art of Kissing, Heal Me with Your Mouth. The bishop has also defended himself by saying, first, that it was a book he wrote in his youth, and above all, that he wrote it to help young people to find other ways to express their affection without falling into prematrimonial sex. That this was the cause. That is to say, well, you can express your affections to the other person with a kiss and not by sleeping with her. This is what the bishop has said, and he also adds that he has written a lot of other books and that it seems unfair that the attention has been fixed only on that work, a work of his youth. For example, he has written a book entitled The 5 Minutes with the Holy Spirit, which is a bestseller, a short book of spirituality, but nevertheless, it is still being published, and he has done and continues to do good to many people to help them to get closer to God, and in this particular case, to the Holy Spirit. Those are 2 of the objections made to him. Perhaps the most serious objections are related to his theological opinions, especially starting with the one of them, the one in which he once affirmed that the position of the Vicar of Christ, the successor of St. Peter, is not linked, does not have to be linked to the Bishop of Rome. And this is an affirmation that Cardinal Mueller, former prefect of the Doctrine of the Faith, has recalled that it is a heretical affirmation. Moreover, in a homily on March 5th, Monsignor Fernandez denounced that the Church, these are his words, has woven in a whole philosophy and a morality full of classifications, a way of classifying people, of labeling them. This one is like this one is like that, this one can receive communion, this one cannot, this one can be forgiven, and this one cannot be forgiven, referring without saying explicitly to those people who can receive neither confession or communion because they are not married in their church, and are living as a husband and wife, having sexual relations between them, regardless of whatever they are homosexual or heterosexual. Well, this is naturally goes against the teachings of the church, and this is an opinion that the bishop did not make explicit what he was referring to, but what could imply that he could be in favor of admitting confession and communion all persons who for whatever circumstances would not be married in the church. It is an interpretation. It is not something he said explicitly, but it is one of the things that those who have criticized him have not recalled. On the same subject, he wrote an article in the magazine Theology of the Catholic University of Buenos Aires. In this article, he justified the use of condoms in those cases in which one of the two members of the couple, the man, for example, was not willing, was unable, or did not want to practice sexual abstinence, which is linked to the application of the use of natural means of birth control. Then, to avoid the breakup of marriage, charity will lead the use of condoms in order to avoid a greater evil, such as the breakup of the marriage. Well, this is some of the objections that this week have been made public against him, and from which he ran into, as I said, in the case of the book, has defended himself. As for the letter with which the Pope accompanies the appointment of Monsignor Fernandez, it is made clear that the Pontiff wants a profound change in the way in which the dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith must carry out his mission, and even in the content of the same mission. It surprised and hurt some people when the Pope said that, quote, the dicastery that you will preside over come to use in moral methods in other times, end quote, not specifying to which era he was referring. It could be, though, that he was accusing the predecessor of Monsignor Fernandez, Monsignor Ladaria, or even Pope Benedict XVI, who for so many years presided over the doctrine of the faith. It was Monsignor Fernandez himself who in an interview clarified and said that the Pope was referring to the time of the Inquisition, in which he explained the context and everything else, but he also said that indeed things had been carried out at the time that were not right, such as some counted cases of torture. In the Pope's letter, it is also said that in those times, rather than promoting theological knowledge, possible doctrine errors were persecuted. What I expect from you is certainly something very different. Now, in the new doctrine of the faith, doctrine errors will not be persecuted, or at least that can be deduced from these words of the Pope, and that time errors were persecuted. What I expect from you is something very different. Next, the Pope clarifies what he expects from the new doctrine of the faith. The Holy Father says, quote, the Church needs to grow in her interpretation of the revealed word and in her understanding of the truth, without this implying the imposition of a single way of expressing it, because the different lines of philosophical, theological, and pastoral thought, if they allow themselves to be harmonized by the Holy Spirit in respect and love, can also make the Church grow. This harmonious growth, end quote, says the Pope. Quote, will perceive Christians' doctrine more efficiently than any mechanism of control. It is good that your task expresses that the Church encourage the charism of theologians and their effort for theological research, providing that they are not content with the desk theology, with the cold and hard logic that seeks to dominate everything, end quote. So much for the Pope's words, which are open to all kinds of interpretations. In fact, some have interpreted them as a refoundation of the dicastery, more along the lines of the International Theological Commission or the Pontifical Biblical Commission, in which the exchange of opinion among theologians is encouraged, rather than that of the dicastery, as it has been until now, dedicated to defending the faith. Would this new doctrine of the faith have reserved to defend the divinity of Christ against Arius, or to defend the Catholic faith against Luther? However, also this week something else has happened, and it seems to me significant and providential that it has happened just in these days. An Italian theologian specialized in moral theology, Martin Linder, has been rejected by the Vatican to occupy the position of dean of the Faculty of Philosophy and Theology, a diocese in northern Italy. The reason for this rejection is because his theologian in some of his expressions defends the blessing of homosexual couples. Because of his teaching, the Vatican has voted his appointment as dean. The reaction has been very strong. More than 100 theologians have expressed their solidarity with him and have again accused the Holy See for everything. The question is, who was behind this prohibition? Perhaps some rigid person who is still hidden in some Vatican dicastery? The prohibition comes from the dicastery for Catholic culture and education. At the head of that dicastery is the Portuguese Cardinal Tolentino, who is probably one of the most liberal cardinals there is in the Vatican. And yet, Tolentino's dicastery has prohibited this theologian, who is in favor of the blessing of homosexual couples, from holding the position of dean in this faculty of theology. It seems significant to me, and perhaps it can give us a clue as to what may happen in the future also with the doctrine of the faith, because perhaps one thing is what one could like to do, and another thing is what one has to do when times come to make decisions. In any case, time will tell. Time will tell what the doctrine of the faith will do in the future when cases arise, as has just happened with this Italian theologian in favor of the blessing of homosexual couples. A third piece of news this week, terrible, very painful, has been what has happened to the Nicaraguan Bishop Monsignor Alvarez. Monsignor Alvarez, Bishop of Matagalpa, was imprisoned, accused by the treason, sentenced to 26 years in jail, and absurd accusation, simply because he defended the freedom of Nicaraguan people. They offered him deportation, that he could go to the United States and nothing else could happen to him there, or else, if he preferred to stay in his country, they will put him in jail. They have kept him in jail for more than 3 months now, in an isolated room, closed, without any ventilation, a room of 2 by 2.5 meters. Can anyone imagine the suffering of this man? Can anyone imagine the horror of being in the room without air conditioning, without a window, in a country as hot as Nicaragua? It is real torture. Well, this week in a process that it is still not completely clear, it seems that they have taken him out of the torture, out of the room. I don't say red hot, but also they have taken him out. They have taken him to the Episcopal Conference, and it seems that with the presence of some Vatican authorities, they have offered him again the possibility of deportation or to go back to the prison. The bishop, who said 3 months ago that he preferred prison because to lead meant to be silent, has said that he preferred to return to prison, and he has been in prison again in the same terrible room with no ventilation, and who knows how many degrees of temperature. It is an example, and it is also a reason for hope. It is a reason for hope because there are still bishops, and surely many more than the case of Monsignor Alvarez. There are still bishops who are willing to give their lives for Christ. It is an example for all of us that tells us how far we have to go for love of the Lord. And it is, I repeat, the reason for hope because there are still these extraordinary fruits of the holiness in the church. Let us not stop praying for this martyrium bishop, and let us also pray for the new prefect of the Doctrine of the Faith, Monsignor Fernandez, who wrote that book on the Holy Spirit, so that he may be guided by the Holy Spirit and make of the Doctrine of the Faith the dicastery that protects, words, and explains in the best possible way the treasure of the faith that can never be betrayed. Until next week, God willing.